Interpretation tonight. We do have translation available in Mandarin and Portuguese, so you can follow the directions on your screen to access that. My name is Jill Karanis. I am the new Director of Student Support for Quincy Public Schools, and I am joined tonight by Lisa Barron, Sarah Perlman, and Meg Smith, all from the Alliance for Inclusion and Prevention, and Thelma Ramirez and Hannah Broderick from the ESO Lab and the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Our district is so appreciative of the new partnership with AIP and the ESO Lab. This has allowed us to explore a new evidence-based, fun, and engaging SEL curriculum that you will hear a lot more about in just a minute. It has given, what we're most thrilled about, I should say, is that it's given the opportunity for every one of our elementary school teachers and counselors to have access to meaningful, relevant, and impactful SEL lessons to help bolster the social, emotional, and academic success of our students. If you have any questions during this presentation, we are more than happy to answer them. We will ask that you put your questions in the chat. And then at the end of the presentation, the panelists will take some time to answer those questions for you. Lastly, again, if you're in need of any translation, you can follow the directions on the green screen in front of you, which sort of is telling you to click on the little interpretation globe at the bottom of your screen, and then you can access the language that you need. Again, we have it in Mandarin and in Portuguese tonight. We hope that you find tonight's presentation very informative and helpful. I think you're in for a great one. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Lisa Barron from Alliance for Inclusion and Prevention.
Thank you so much, Jill. Welcome, everyone. It's great to be back with you. I am Lisa Barron from the Alliance for Inclusion and Prevention. I'm the director of our Center for Trauma Care in Schools, and I'm also the program director of Select Schools. And we're doing this in Quincy and also in Randolph. So it's a big project. It's a very exciting project. And first, I just want to have the whole team introduce themselves because we have different roles and things that we're doing in the districts. So again, I'm Lisa Barron, project director, and I'm going to turn it over to our team. I'll start with Sarah Perlman.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Perlman. I am a licensed social worker, and for Select Schools, I am one of the on-site coordinators. So I am going into schools and providing consultation around the kernels and other aspects of our Select Schools grant. So working with teachers and the counselors across all the tiers. I'll hand it over to Meg.
Hi, everybody. My name is Meg Smith. I also am an AIP employee, and I work, just like Sarah said, within the Quincy Public School system, working on bringing kernels to your schools, your K-5 schools, and we are there to meet with teachers and really kind of spread sort of the knowledge about kernels to all the teaching staff, administrators, and we are really excited by this presentation tonight to bring it now to you, the parents. So I'm going to pass it on to Thelma.
Thank you, Meg. Hi, everyone. My name is Thelma Ramirez. I am a research manager at the ESO Lab. The ESO Lab we're the developers of the social and emotional learning kernels. We'll be talking a little bit more about those kernels tonight. And I work closely with my colleague, Hannah Broderick. Really, we've worked closely helping to adapt the kernels for Quincy Public Schools. So Hannah, I'll pass it over to you, even though I've already kind of introduced you.
Thanks, Thelma. Hi, everyone. Like Thelma said, my name is Hannah Broderick. I am a research assistant at the ESO Lab, working on this project and a few other projects, implementing kernels in the US and internationally.
Okay, thanks, team. So what we're going to do today, I'll just review briefly. I'm going to give you first a brief overview of Select Schools. Some of you may have heard of it last year, but I'm going to go into a little more detail this year. And then we're going to spend the majority of this hour reviewing the SEL kernels. And we're going to review what they are, how they're being used in the K-5 classrooms, including what our AIP staff, Sarah and Meg, are experiencing when they visit the schools. And then after that, we're going to show you some simple social and emotional learning strategies that you can use at home with your children to reinforce the skills they're learning about and developing in school. And then finally, I'm going to briefly talk about some surveys that we've been administering to staff, to students, and you as the caregivers. And then we'll spend the remaining few minutes just answering any questions you might have. Okay. So just a quick reminder of how to access translation services. And this is our partnership. Select Schools is actually a 5-year Department of Education, U.S. Department of Education grant. It has 3 years of implementation, and we are in our first year of that. So we have 2 more years with you after this one. And we at AIP are providing the overall project leadership and coordination, as well as we provide expertise in school-based trauma treatment. And we're also coordinating the evaluation effort. And then our colleagues at Harvard ESEL Lab have, as they've said, developed these kernels and spent decades researching their effectiveness. And it's been a real pleasure to work with them. Lastly, we're also working with the American Institutes for Research. Kathleen Guarino, who is not with us tonight, created the Trauma Sensitive School Training Package for the U.S. Department of Education. So she is heading up the Trauma Sensitive Schools effort of this project in both districts that I'll talk about next. So first, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the full program. So we are largely talking about the kernels tonight, but there's this other piece to it. So Select Schools integrates the 2 boxes on the left, the school-wide trauma-sensitive school initiatives and the trauma-informed SEL kernels. And what the trauma-sensitive school work does is really provide the framework, or you could think of it as an umbrella for the kernels work and other initiatives that are happening in the schools. And it's done school by school, and it's done with a work group of 5 to 7 staff. And this work group analyzes data from a current practice survey that looks at school-wide trauma-informed practices at each school. And the work group determines where the gaps may lie in these practices at each school. And they are in the process of prioritizing action steps going forward. So some of those action steps may just be for this year. They may continue into subsequent years as well. And so that piece of the project is all going on behind the scenes. So your children aren't involved with it directly, but it is going to impact them in a positive way. And so then the box below that is the trauma-informed kernels. So these are the activities that the students are actually doing in school that you'll hear about in just a minute. And our rationale for this project was that we thought if we integrate the kernels into the larger trauma-sensitive school framework and do it effectively, we should see students receiving these SEL supports at all 3 tiers within a sustained trauma-sensitive school climate. And then research indicates that a sustained trauma-sensitive school climate, which is these school-wide work group initiatives, along with the kernel supports that they're getting at all 3 tiers, is really what's needed to achieve the last box on the far right, which is improved student achievement and social emotional well-being. Okay. All right. So we go to the next slide. All right, so now I'm going to turn it over to Thelma Ramirez from the ESEL Lab to tell you more about the kernels.
Thank you, Lisa. So those of you who attended our session last year heard about the kernels. So we gave you an introduction to the kernels. We wanted to take a couple more minutes today just to give you a refresher if you attended last time around. And for those of you who may be new to the SEL kernels, you'll get to learn a little bit more about the background. So I'm going to go ahead and and play the video now.
I wish that people knew how important children's social and emotional skills are. I am Stephanie Jones. I'm on the faculty at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and I am director of the EASL Lab. We developed an approach to supporting children's skills for learning in life, or their social and emotional skills, that's called Kernels. And the Kernels really represent what we think of as the core active ingredient of more complicated approaches. So they are strategies and practices that are drawn from effective programs, and they are simple, they're easy to do, they're highly flexible, they're adaptable to different needs and settings, and educators can choose them. They can choose which one to do and when in a way that suits their particular needs. The Kernels are focused on a core set of 5 domains. A social domain, so children's social interactions, their social problem solving, perspective taking. A cognitive domain, which we don't often think of as part of this whole area, but reflects those really important executive functions, children's self-regulation, their critical thinking, those kinds of things. An emotions domain, so emotion knowledge, emotion expression, emotion vocabulary, emotion regulation. And then there are 2 additional domains. One is about children's sort of attitudes and beliefs about the world and themselves, and the other is really focused on children's kind of self-concept or their emerging identity. So really deeply about how they think about themselves in the world. Playing and doing the routines that are in the Kernels cards and doing them in a consistent and repeated way, we see improvements in those essential social and emotional skills. That then cascades into other domains that we know are important, like academic skills, mental health and well-being, and so on. A second area is really about adults. So in playing or practicing the Kernels with kids, adults are also growing their own skills, right? Because they're participating too, and everybody needs support and opportunity to practice in these areas. Across all of the work that we've done with the Kernels over the last 10 to 15 years, a couple of things have stayed the same. One is that they all have the same essential structure. Being clear about what the skill is, playing a game or doing some kind of activity to practice the skill, and doing a debrief. So that's always the same. The way they're different across settings is the activities might vary, the specific focus might vary, but educators and parents and adults really gravitate toward the Kernels because they are simple to do, they are flexible and adaptable, and really because they're fun. They're fun to do with kids. Children's social and emotional development is foundational to their academic success. And so anything that we can do to foster them, to support them, and to do it in a way that works for educators in their classroom, we want to do it efficiently and effectively and in a fun, exciting way. It will help all of us.
Great. So let me just make sure that we're back here. And sometimes the slideshow function goes away, so I'm just going to do a slideshow again. There we go. All right, so now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Hannah to share a little bit more about what the Kernels have been looking like in Quincy schools. So Sarah and Meg will share some of that, but Hannah will get us started sharing about the training process and where we are with that.
Thanks, Thelma. So over the past year, we have trained 352 classroom teachers, counselors, school support staff from all 11 elementary schools in Quincy. And all of these folks have completed 2 Kernels training. So we started with one initial training in the fall, and then we did an additional training in January and February where we checked in with teachers. So that initial training was really focused on, it wasn't so different than what you all are hearing right now. So it really focused on what SEL kernels are, how they support social and emotional learning. We practiced some kernels together, so teachers got the opportunity to get in groups and do role plays. Throughout this work, we've found that it's really, really important that teachers get lots of practice with one another before getting into the classroom. So we really try and emphasize that in our trainings. And then at the end of that training, we had teachers plan how they were going to use them in their daily classroom routine. So the kernels are really short, they're flexible, they're meant to be adaptable to teachers and students' needs. And so we work pretty closely with teachers to figure out a way to implement the kernels that work best for them. And then during our booster session, we focused on sharing what's working and adapting kernels for students' needs. So it was a really nice opportunity to hear from educators about what's been going on in the classroom while using kernels with students. We had educators share out about adaptations that they've made, so things that are working, things that aren't working. That second session is typically a little bit more engaging, and we do a lot of capacity building with the educators. This project is also really special because we have Sarah and Meg who are in the schools who are constantly providing support and kind of little mini trainings throughout this project. So the teachers are getting lots of support throughout the implementation of the SEL kernels. And I will pass it to Sarah and Meg.
Thank you, Hannah. As Hannah mentioned, it's been really exciting for Meg and myself to go into the schools and see the kernels be put into action and work with the teachers and different staff on how the implementation process is going. So over the next couple of slides, Meg and I will switch off just sharing some insight, examples, some stories, and just a little bit of what we've been hearing from different staff on how things are going with the kernels. And so one thing that we've seen and heard about is students having more confidence. So whether it's in the brain games or other kernels, teachers have been seeing students who may struggle with certain skill sets really get to shine. So kids who don't always feel successful in academics, they're realizing I can focus, I can remember this, I can work as part of a group. And that sense of capability, it spills over into other parts of their day. Transition time, group work, and harder tasks. And so all of that ties into academics because we know that when children feel confident, they're more ready to learn and to try again despite meeting academic or social challenges. And so a really nice example of this is we had a teacher give us feedback about a student of hers who tends to struggle with working memory, especially in remembering directions or recalling different academic facts, math facts, reading, and tends to be pretty hard on herself because of this. And the teacher decided to do a brain game as a transition after lunch to help with focus for the students. And they played a game called On My Pizza I Like. And so this is where you're having to memorize and repeat toppings on a pizza that your peers come up with. So you have to stop, listen, focus, and remember and recall all the different toppings that each of the 20 or so students are choosing. And so despite this student typically struggling with memory, in this game, she really shined. And she was at the very end of the circle, which is the hardest place to be. And she remembered every single topping that her peers recited. And then the teacher said at the end of the brain game, her student ran up to her and said, I'm so shocked. I'm so proud of myself. I wasn't sure if I could do this. And even her classmates were excited for her. So it built that nice sense of community as well. And so this is just an example of showing their potential and capability, as well as still building on those skills that can continue to be enhanced and help with that confidence. All right. And then another thing we're hearing is that kernels are really helping with this idea of classroom climate. So because kernels are built into daily routines, they create a predictable moment for connection. So that's, starting the day, checking in on feelings, or wrapping up the day together. And teachers describe calmer rooms where students feel like they belong and they know what to expect. So, for kids who have had tougher school experiences, those routines help school feel safer and more welcoming. And so, some feedback that teachers noted to be helpful in building relationships and providing social support is using, a kernel called community circle. And so, those are most notably incorporated at the beginning of the day as a morning meeting routine, after maybe a difficult interaction or a transition, after recess or lunch, or even to end the day on a debrief. And we've heard some really positive feedback around the effects of community circles on providing an open forum for discussion and connection. So one teacher in particular actually mentioned that students responded well to questions that she's tried, such as, what's your favorite food? What's one thing you enjoy doing on the weekends? Something that made you smile today, to show a sense of connection and commonality, or even some differences. And then also mentioned how it was helpful in further exploring relationships for peers who may struggle more with those social skills by asking, what makes a good friend? What do you do to be a good friend? Even bringing up this idea of problem solving and reviewing expectations for the classroom, whether it's after lunch or recess. Again, those less structured times that students may struggle with. And we heard a lot of success in what makes a classroom feel welcoming. What does respect look like? Why is it important to follow the rules? And then how do you repair friendships? What does that look like? And so really all of that also comes together for academics, because we know when classrooms feel safe and predictable and connected, again, students can use more of their energy to focus and participate and persist with challenging work.
Thank you, Sarah. Another powerful theme is shared language and consistency. Your K-5 students are hearing the same words from teachers and administrators across all grade level classrooms throughout the district, as they learn about what is belly breathing, what's a feelings map, how do I do a thermometer check-in, how about the cool kid? That means when a teacher, counselor, recess aide, or paraprofessional says, let's stop and use that belly breathing that you practice in class, kids are already aware and know the routine and what to expect. We even have heard teachers report that their students have shared that they've heard their siblings talk of the same kernels and comparing notes. Oh yeah, we did the cool kid too in our class, or we used the feelings thermometer in my class today. So just a note here, the feelings thermometer seen in this picture here, this one was made by the husband of a teacher in this classroom. So it's often used by teachers as a visual scale for students to notice how big or small their feelings are. Just like a thermometer shows temperature. It helps students of all ages and abilities see their emotions, which can feel less scary and confusing than sometimes the vague, overwhelming sensations. One teacher has even placed the thermometer with clothespins with kids' names on it, so kids can actually move their clothespin once they feel like their thermometer has come down. They can let people know, I'm feeling better right now because I've done certain strategies to make me have me feel more calmer and get support. So that common language across grades and adults makes schools feel more predictable and connected for students. School principals have reported to us that they've used kernels such as the belly breathing and other focus-related kernels to begin school-wide assemblies with great success. So academically, that consistency helps too. When students don't have to relearn routines every year, they can settle more quickly, feel secure, and spend more time engaged in actual learning. Back to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Meg. I'm really excited about this one. Another theme that we've seen is students taking ownership of the SEL kernels. So it's not just adults saying, let's do a kernel now. We're hearing stories of students noticing what's happening in the room, reading the room, and actually suggesting kernels themselves. So, for example, at our last booster training, just a few weeks ago, we brought up body mapping, and just very briefly, body mapping, the picture that you see in this slide, it really helps students notice and understand different emotions in their body so that they can better learn how to take care of themselves and pair strategies to help them regulate. And so at this training, we had a teacher, she raised her hand and was really excited and said, I have a story about body mapping in my classroom. And she shared that there was a moment, a day when there had been a bus accident prior to school. And while students who were involved in that were being tended to, her class, the students in the classroom at the time, they were doing body mapping as one of their morning activities. And when the other students returned to class, some were understandably still experiencing some feelings and emotions from the morning. So one classmate noticed this and actually approached one of their friends and said, you should do a body map to really see how you're feeling. And that student agreed and went to do the body map. And the teacher overheard that student saying, I'm noticing that my knees are shaking, my heart is racing, I think I'm feeling anxious. And the other peer said, well, why don't you go over to the calming corner and try belly breathing to help yourself feel better? Which is just a really powerful moment. And it's moments like that tell us kids aren't only learning the routine, they're learning to pause, notice what they need, and choose a strategy. And not just for themselves, but also helping their friends do the same. So they're building that autonomy and those independent skills to notice what they need in the moment and proactively manage their feelings. Back to you, Meg.
So a question that we have heard sometimes is how do kernels connect to academics? And Sarah and I have to say that your teachers in the Quincy district are giving us lots of suggestions as to what they have done to increase the usage of kernels into academic lessons. We recently met with a teacher who let us know that she used one of the kernels that we had covered in our kernels booster session. So a shout out to those booster sessions that we had covered in our training with the teachers. She let us know that she did a lesson for her fourth graders on a historical figure. And she thought she would expand her community circle discussion to bring in more depth to her lesson on character analysis of the figures and times being discussed. So she had done the feeling thermometer with her students and she had previously done the feeling thermometer with her students, but she brought it into the lesson, asking students to think about what do you think this character was feeling at this time, at a particular moment before or after the event that they were involved in? And how do you think they might feel that emotion in their body and where? So she brought not only the feelings thermometer, but also the body mapping into this lesson that Sarah had spoken about earlier. She felt that this was such a powerful and engaging way to make this message come alive for her students. And I think I'm going to Thelma.
Thank you, Meg, and thank you, Sarah, for sharing those stories and those anecdotes of how you're seeing the kernels come to life. I think before we jump into this piece, I just want to add, from our perspective as the developers of the materials, we don't often get the opportunity to have folks like Sarah and Meg be so close to the ground and hearing from teachers and hearing from students. And as they're doing that, we are making changes to the kernels. We're adding resources because we want to make sure that the set of materials, the set of activities that are in the hands of Quincy students and teachers are going to be accessible, they're useful, and they're relevant to their context. And so on our end, it's been a privilege to be able to hear from you all. And Jill has been fantastic in helping Meg and Sarah get connected to the principals and get into the schools. I mean, it's really special. We often, get questions around how are Kernels different from something like a Second Step or these other SEL programs. And all of those programs are wonderful, and we've learned a lot from those programs. But I think one thing that is very special and different about the Kernels work is that we work so closely with folks who are on the ground, like educators, and we're often making those adaptations. So thank you, Meg and Sarah, for sharing that. And it's very encouraging and motivating, I think, for all of us. So, we want to kind of, end on, or, go to this next section that's really about connecting the kernels and what's happening in the classroom to the home, right? So we wanted to end really by offering a few concrete ideas that you could use at home, especially I think as we head into what can be a very busy testing season. So MCAS testing is right around the corner, and we've heard from teachers already about that. We're working to put together resources for teachers that are specifically around the kernels and the brain games, which are a set of kernels that are game-like that they can use during times like testing where maybe they don't have a ton of time, but they really need something to re-energize kiddos or to get them focused. And so you all know as parents that students are going to be sitting for long stretches of time, and they're going to be using a lot of mental energy. So it'll be normal to see them come home maybe a little bit more tired, a little more grouchy, sometimes a little bit more wound up. And so we were thinking, as teachers are using the kernels at school to help kids reset and stay ready to learn, our team was thinking through, what are some of the very kind of similar ideas that can be helpful for you all to try, you all as parents and caregivers to try out at home, whether it's before school, after a long day, or whenever your child needs a quick reset. So this slide shows our cool down toolkit, or one page of our cool down toolkit, which is part of our Kernels resources and materials. So all classroom teachers who have been trained with the Kernels have a version of the cool down toolkit. We took that toolkit and we adapted it specifically for families. And so it's a collection of these short, simple options kids can use to calm down, to refocus, sometimes to re-energize, because sometimes that is needed. But let me just click off of this, and I actually will share with you when you hit that QR code, or when you scan that QR code, it'll take you to a version or to this version of the cool down toolkit, and it's an 8-page document. You can print whatever you feel is useful in the document, but you have this introductory page, and then we have that visual that I was just showing you, which is almost like a choice board and tells you about, or gives you kind of a snapshot of all of the strategies that are part of the toolkit. So you'll see things like movement breaks, stretching, belly breathing, positive self-talk chart, which has these wonderful phrases that you can use with kiddos. Again, like I mentioned, some stretching, different kinds of stretching exercises, progressive muscle relaxation. We have a cool down process. So these 4 simple steps for ways to cool down, again, that are being used in the classroom. So our hope is that, it'll be easier for you all to pick some of this up and use at home, because kids will have been introduced to a lot of this already in class. The peace path, and we have the feelings thermometer that Meg shared a little bit more about during that moment, during an earlier moment. So we're hoping that you'll be able to use this resource, or that you'll find something in this resource helpful. But I'm going to kind of pause here just to give us this visual as I talk a little bit more about some potential ways that you could use something like the cool down toolkit during MCAS. So this particular visual is one of my favorite resources from the cool down toolkit. When Hannah and I were working on developing this, I I told her, it feels very much like a choice board or something that I would use with my little one at home. So I imagine something like this would be kept somewhere visible in the house, like on the refrigerator, a bulletin board, or maybe even by a homework spot. And as we're thinking about testing season, we're thinking, well, the morning of the testing, like what is something that you could potentially do from the set of activities? So, if you're noticing that your child is maybe a little groggy or not totally ready to get to school, that kind of thing, you might say, hey, let's wake up our bodies with one thing from the board. So do you want to do a quick stretch, or do you want to do a few jumping jacks? Do you want to do some movement, right? Or after a long testing day, when they get home, they might be wiped out or cranky, and you again might go back to the choice board and say, today seemed like a long day. Let's pick something from the toolkit. And, do you want to draw about your day? Do you want to do some belly breathing? Do you want to try a grounding exercise like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1? So, just choosing and doing one could help them really decompress before moving on to homework or, an after school sport or family time. It's really hard to transition from a long day. And of course, like when feelings can get really big, we know it's very typical and normal for kiddos to have big feelings, for all of us to have big feelings. And we have meltdowns all the time. And it may be more common during times like testing, right? Testing season where everyone is a little bit more tired and they're on a shorter fuse. And so if we're seeing a little bit more of that happening with a sibling or that kind of thing, you might want to, again, go to that feelings thermometer, right? That Meg was talking about. So you might say, like, where are you on the thermometer when we're feeling, on whatever feeling, whether it's even, maybe you want to say tired. Are you on a 1 or a 5 or frustrated? Are you from a 1 to 5? If they say 4 or 5 with a big feeling, so okay, let's pick one thing from the toolkit to bring that number down a little. Do we want to try some belly breathing? Do we want to do something like that? So again, really thinking creatively about how you can use this. You'll probably notice that, all of these strategies are not new or, so different from things that you've probably heard about before or even tried or are already doing at home. What we know is that through research, we know that these kinds of activities can be really helpful for children to help them manage stress. And sometimes just having some kind of visual can help us remember, oh, okay, let me go back to that. And I also want to add, like, I think the power of these types of activities like kernels, as Stephanie said in the video, is really using them consistently at home and at school. So that children can learn, whenever I'm feeling overwhelmed, these are the things I can do to take care of myself. So let me go back to this slide. So everyone has that QR code if they want to access it. But Hannah, I don't know if you want to add anything else about the toolkit. I know that you have been using it, or you use it and you help create the resource. So
Yeah, thanks, Thelma. I think the only thing I'd like to add is we'd also really hope that this will be a conversation starter for you and your kids. Like if you're using one of these strategies, ask them about their experience using it in school. We really encourage you to reflect with them. Like, are these strategies easy for them? Some kids do really well with belly breathing, and some kids have a really, really difficult time. We encourage you to ask questions about like, when else throughout your day could you use this? It's a really nice tool to connect with your children and to ask them about what's going on in the classroom. And you might learn something that you didn't know. The only other thing I'll share, I saw the request in the chat about a link to this document. And we will also, I know sometimes the QR code is a little bit tricky. We will also share this with Jill, a link to the PDF directly, and she can share that with the Quincy community. But like Thelma said, this is a resource that I use in schools with kids all the time. And it's really, really nice to be able to just reference it. Like once kids get used to it, it's nice to just say like, okay, here are some options. We also like have kids generate other options, like have them make their own choice board where they pick out the strategies that work best for them. We really encourage you all to take this and run with it. And I think that's all I have to add.
yeah, thank you, Hannah. Well, we'll pass it over to Lisa for the wrap up.
All right. Thank you, Thelma. Thank you, Hannah. Well, so you've heard a lot about kernels now, and we hope you've got a little better sense of how it all fits into the trauma-sensitive schools piece. I did see that question about trauma in the chat, so I will answer that question. I first just wanted to tell you what's coming up. So as I said, we have 3 years of intervention with you and your students, your children, in the Quincy Public Schools. And that consists of both the trauma sensitive school piece that is being done at each school with the work group, and also the kernels implementation. And the staff are getting trained on an annual basis. And then we are in not just Quincy, but also in Randolph Public Schools. And because we are also a research grant, we are conducting surveys so that we can test this model so that we can see if it's effective. So we have these surveys on the trauma-sensitive school practices that are happening at each school, and also questions related to school climate, and which really means how safe a school feels, and how there's one's sense of belongingness, for example. And the students in grades 3 to 5 are taking these surveys on an annual basis. The staff are taking the current practice and the SEL and climate, and then we just sent out the caregiver, parent caregiver survey as well, so that we really hope that you'll participate in that. And then in addition, we also have adapted these kernels for the upper tiers, tiers 2 and 3, for the counselors to use with students who need additional supports. And we're going to be checking to see their sense of the effectiveness of those adaptations. And then again, as we mentioned, Sarah and Meg, who are here, are very busily going from district to district and school to school. They're in 15 different schools. We have another staff person who attends work group meetings. And then Sarah and Meg are providing that implementation support with the staff, and also just tracking the work of the staff. Okay. Very good. So there's that, just a little bit about us as Alliance for Inclusion and Prevention. And I think we can just move to our question and answer period. So let's see. So there was a question earlier about a definition of trauma. And although this wasn't a trauma training per se, and there are a lot of different definitions of trauma depending on the researcher or the trauma model developer. They come up with their own definitions, essentially. But what it ultimately means is that there is an event that occurs, an external event, that pretty much overwhelms one's ability to cope internally. They don't have the internal resources or skills to cope with that event, and maybe do not have the resources externally to also cope with that. And what it does is it fundamentally disrupts one's sense of safety in the world. And so what this project really is doing is working to build skills, right? So that we have more skills to cope with those adverse events and traumas, and also working school-wide to create that safe environment that builds community and connection, right? So that is in essence of what we're doing. And it's good for all students, but really essential for those students who have been impacted by trauma. Okay, so I hope that answers that question for you. Let's see what else we have. So excited for my kindergartner and first grader. Yeah, we're excited too. That is great. Thank you. How can I get another copy of the participation permission slip? Is that the is that for the
Yeah,
survey?
I'm wondering if that, so the chat, it unfortunately is not interactive for our participants, but I'm wondering if you mean, I think it was Claire who posted that. I'm wonder if you mean the survey, the student survey, We did a passive consent, which was that you could opt out if you did not want your child to participate in the survey. So what I think would be best for this, just so I make sure I'm answering your question appropriately, is if you see my name on the screen, Jill Karanis, you could email me directly, Jill Karanis, first and last name, at quincypublicschools.com, similar to every other QPS employee's email. And I can do that for you. If in case that wasn't your question, I want to make sure that I'm answering it right. So feel free to email me directly if I did not answer that, although I see in the response that yes, that it was opt out. Yes. So if you did not opt out, then your child would have participated in the student survey that we did.
Right. If they were in grades 3 to 5,
Mm-hmm.
and if they have adequate English language skills.
Mm-hmm.
So those would be the other conditions.
And then all students or all teachers K through 5 have received the Kernels kit. So all students have access to the Kernels, although they might not be answering any or anything like that. I also just wanted to add, Lisa, because folks sometimes ask us, we work in social and emotional learning, and sometimes they ask us, well, what's the difference between SEL and trauma-informed SEL? And I like to say, high quality social and emotional learning is trauma-informed social and emotional learning, right? We know from research that sometimes we do need to pay specific attention to skill building, in particular for children who've had more adverse experiences. It's harder for them to learn. It's harder for them to interact socially, but all of that skill building that is really good for kiddos who are either facing trauma in that moment or have, is also really helpful and really great for all students, right? And so I think at the lab, or at our lab, we don't really see a huge distinction between trauma-informed social and emotional learning and high-quality social and emotional learning, because we know that it's good for all children, regardless of what they've experienced. And it helps prepare them, like you were saying, Lisa, for things that can happen in the future, right? And so oftentimes we might think, well, trauma, what does that exactly mean? But there can be traumatic events, throughout the day. Like the bus accident is a small moment where kiddos were able to pull from trauma-informed practice and really, process feelings. And so, yeah, so I think we're really lucky to be able to do this project and to do it with Lisa and folks at AIP who are experts in that field. But we're able to bring both the best practices from social and emotional learning and all the wonderful expertise around trauma-informed work for the Kernels in particular.
Thank you, Thelma. I would just add to that to give like an academic analogy. We intentionally teach academic skills and skill building so that our students can progress and build upon it and be academically successful or, academically fit. The same principle can be applied to the social emotional world, that oftentimes we need to intentionally teach these skills. Not every student has these just innately or has been taught. So we in Quincy really want to bring an intentional focus to it, not have this be a siloed approach where a student may leave and go to a group for once a week, but rather bring it to all the students, intentionally teach this skill and integrate it into the fabric of our day to day. So it becomes normalized, and we know that all our students are developing those skills that truly they're going to need lifelong. So before we wrap up, I want to be mindful of time. I want to thank our panelists from AIP and from the ESEL lab. Presentation was great. I hope parents that you have a little more information as to what the Kernels are and how they're being implemented across all of our elementary schools in Quincy. I'd like to end on the fact that I would be the person that kind of oversees the implementation of these lessons within our elementary schools. And I'm getting some really great feedback from principals, teachers, and students on how fun they are, the kids are engaged, but that they're seeing the impact, that kids want to do them, and they see the relevance, how they're connected to the day-to-day, academic success and social success. So we're thrilled about the partnership. We know that it's only going to get better. As we have new teachers enter our district, we will give them the curriculum. This part of this grant, we've got the curriculum for all of our elementary classroom teachers. It is, lively and colorful and very easy to follow. So we're really, really thrilled about it. So I just want to make sure that we didn't miss anything else in the chat. I don't think we did. So with that said, if there are no other questions, we will conclude for the night. And we will again post this on our website in the event that you want to go back to it to reference something, or if you know somebody who missed the presentation, they can access this on our website. And I would just reiterate that you can email me directly if you're looking for a specific lesson or task or the toolkit or anything. You can email me at jillkaranis@quincypublicschools.com, and I'm happy to get whatever resource you might need. So with that, we conclude the presentation. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to our panelists, and we hope you have a great night.
Thank you.
Good night.
To everyone.